The envelope had no return address, just my name handwritten in my father's neat, angular script. Claire Whitmore. Nothing more. It arrived 3 days after Thanksgiving, tucked beneath a stack of mail I nearly tossed into the recycling bin. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. I hadn't heard from my parents in nearly 2 years. Not since that last phone call when Dad said it's probably best you don't come around for a while. You always bring tension, Claire. You always have. That was the end of it. Or so I thought. Inside the envelope was a formal ivory card with raised silver letters. The Whitmore family cordially invites you to Christmas dinner, December 25th at 5:00 p.m. Formal attire. Family only. The words were cold in their politeness. No warmth, no we miss you, no handwritten note from my mother tucked inside. Just that sterile formality as if I were a client, not a daughter. I placed the card on the kitchen table and sat down across from it like I was negotiating terms with it. I stared until the sun dipped below the edge of the window and my reflection darkened into nothing. I hadn't been back to the house in Connecticut since Mom's surgery. I'd sent flowers called twice, but Adam said she didn't want to talk, and when she recovered, no one followed up. That silence settled into our bones. It became the language we spoke best. So why, now, was it a peace offering? A trick, a show of seasonal charity, or was it just guilt masquerading as formality? I wasn't sure, but I knew this much: they never invited me unless something was already decided. That was the Whitmore way. Decisions first, then dialogue if there was any at all. I called my friend Rachel that night. She's the kind of friend who listens without filling in your sentences. "Are you going to go?" she asked after a long pause. I hesitated. I shouldn't. But you want to see what this is about." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Exactly. There was a part of me that still remembered the way that house smelled on Christmas Eve. Cinnamon pine needles, the faint scent of my mother's lavender perfume. There were good years once before expectations turned into judgments, before Adam became the heir, and I became the question mark. So I decided to go. I dug through my closet for the dark green coat I hadn't worn in years, the one my mother used to call too serious. I packed a simple dress black flats in a small envelope of my own, just in case. The drive to Connecticut was uneventful. Gray skies, bare trees, the occasional flash of red berries clinging to naked branches like they didn't know the season had already turned. I took the long way, the one that curved past the old lake and the high school football field where Adam used to play. It was muscle memory. Even after all this time, my hands knew where to go. I hadn't been home in 5 Christmases. The last time I arrived late with a bottle of wine and a scarf I'd knit for my mother. She never wore it. She thanked me politely and tucked it into the linen closet like something too delicate or inconvenient to use. That was the Christmas Dad told me, half joking. "You still haven't figured out what real contribution means, have you?" I laughed back then. I always laughed when I didn't know how to defend myself. But the truth was, I had known for a long time that I wasn't what he wanted. I wasn't business-minded like Adam. I didn't quote earnings reports or admire stock performance at the dinner table. I liked books. I liked kids. I taught high school English and ran the after-school poetry club. To Dad, that made me soft. To the family, that made me distant. What they never asked was how hard it was to become distant. When I left home at 18, I had a scholarship and 2 suitcases. Adam helped me load them into my car. He was 17 then, tall, quiet, always watching. We weren't close, but we weren't enemies yet. That came later. I remember the day Dad told me not to come back for the summer. "We're downsizing," he said. "Adam's taking over the garage apartment for his internship. You've got your campus housing, right?" It wasn't cruelty exactly. It was something colder than that practicality with no love underneath. I learned early that in the Whitmore family, value was measured by usefulness, not presence. Still, part of me had held on. Even when I moved out west, even when calls went unanswered and holidays passed in silence, I kept a small box of Christmas ornaments from childhood. A paper star I made in 4th grade, a snowman with my name in red glitter. My mother used to hang it every year near the front of the tree right below the angel. Then one year it wasn't there. No one said anything. It was just gone. That's when I knew. Not that they hated me. Hatred would have been warmer. I knew I'd become an outsider in my own home. Still invited, still included by name, but already written out of the picture in their hearts. But this Christmas was different. This was not a phone call or a polite maybe next year. This was a formal card, sealed and sent like a business deal, and I knew my father too well to think it was sentimental. No, something had already been decided. I was just being summoned to hear it. As I pulled into the familiar circular driveway, the house looked almost unchanged. The wreath on the door was fresh. The lights in the windows glowed with the same golden warmth I remembered as a child. But I wasn't fooled. Warm light doesn't mean welcome. I sat in the car for a moment watching the windows. I could almost see the shadows moving inside Dad pouring scotch into the good crystal, Adam setting the table just right, Mom adjusting the silverware with her usual quiet care. No doubt everything was perfect, polished, rehearsed. Everything except me. I reached into my coat pocket and touched the edge of the envelope I'd brought. Not out of spite. Not out of revenge. Out of something older than either. Clarity, and maybe finally closure. The front door opened before I even reached the top step. Claire Adam said, smiling like we'd just seen each other last week. He wore one of Dad's old cardigans, gray wool wooden buttons, sleeves just a little too long. He'd filled out more since I last saw him, thicker around the shoulders, confident in that easy way men become when they know they've been chosen. I nodded, stepping inside. The warmth hit first, then the smell. Pine cinnamon, something buttery from the oven. It was like stepping into a memory I hadn't asked for. The floors were still polished to a high shine. The same family portrait hung above the fireplace, Dad in uniform, Mom in pearls. Adam with a forced grin, and me in the corner looking off camera like I didn't know where to stand. "You look good," Adam said. "You look settled," I replied. He didn't seem to know what to do with that. He motioned me toward the living room where the fire was already lit. Mom appeared a moment later, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Claire," she said, voice light but careful. "Hi, Mom." She leaned in and gave me a quick dry hug, perfume still lavender. For a second I thought about the scarf in the linen closet. I almost asked if she ever wore it, but the moment passed. "It's nice you could come," she added, already turning back toward the kitchen. No one asked about my work. No one mentioned the years I'd spent teaching mentoring, making ends meet in a town where my name didn't carry any weight. Here I was, still the girl who left. Dad came down the stairs 15 minutes later, dressed like he was meeting a client, dark blazer, pressed slacks, shiny leather shoes. His expression didn't change when he saw me. He nodded once. "Claire." "Hi, Dad." He gestured toward the dining room. "Dinner's ready." It was all so practiced, like I was a guest on a schedule, not a daughter returning home. The table was already set, china plates with silver rims, cloth napkins folded into fans, wine glasses glinting under the chandelier. There were 6 place settings, even though only 5 of us were there. I noticed the extra one, but said nothing. We sat, we ate, we talked about nothing. Adam recapped a recent business trip. Mom asked if I'd tried the potatoes. Dad made a comment about interest rates, and I became very good at nodding. Halfway through dessert, Dad cleared his throat. I wanted to share something he said, reaching into his blazer. He pulled out a long white envelope and placed it gently beside my plate. My fingers didn't move. My stomach knew before my mind caught up. I could feel Adam watching me. Mom's fork stopped midway to her mouth. "You'll want to read that," Dad said. "We've updated some documents. Just housekeeping, really." Housekeeping. That's what they called it. I picked up the envelope, broke the seal, and unfolded the papers inside. A trust amendment. Revised beneficiaries. Effective immediately. My name was nowhere. Dad took a sip of his wine. We felt Adam was best positioned to carry on the family estate. "You have your own life now, and we respect that. But this stays with the family." He said it without anger, without gloating, just conviction, as if this were math, not blood. I folded the paper slowly and placed it back in the envelope. I didn't look up. Mom said nothing. Adam shifted in his chair. "I understand," I said quietly. Dad leaned back, visibly relieved. Then I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my own envelope, smaller square wrapped in gold foil. I brought something too. The gold envelope caught the candlelight as I placed it beside my father's glass. His brows twitched, but only slightly. He didn't touch it. "For you," I said simply. No one moved for a few seconds. You could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the foyer. Dad finally reached over and picked it up. He peeled back the foil like it might contain a gift certificate or a Christmas card. The moment the papers slid out, his face changed. He didn't read them aloud. He didn't need to. His eyes skimmed the first page. Then the second. His lips parted slightly, but no words came. "What's that?" Adam asked, leaning forward. Gerald passed the pages across the table without a sound. Adam read faster, mouth tightening with each line. This can't be right. It's legal," I said. "And final." The room felt suddenly smaller, like the walls were closing in. Only the soft clinking of a spoon in Mom's hand reminded me we were still seated at a dinner table. "What is it?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. No one answered. So I did. "It's the deed I said. To this house." Dad's jaw tensed. "I bought it 3 months ago," I continued, my tone calm. "From the holding company Adam used to refinance your commercial property. The one he defaulted on." Adam turned red. "You went digging through my—" "I went looking," I corrected. "After my name disappeared from the last estate report Aunt Marianne accidentally forwarded me. Something felt off. So I looked." Dad straightened his back. "You bought our home without saying a word. No one told me when I was removed from the family trust," I said. "Silence seems to be a tradition around here." The papers sat open between us, signatures, seals, dates, legal, binding. "This house was collateral," I added. "I didn't steal it. I just made an offer when the bank was ready to let it go." Mom's face had gone pale. She looked at Dad, then Adam, and then at me. Why would they sell to you? Because I paid in full, quietly, through a former classmate's investment firm. You'd be surprised what's possible when no one's paying attention to the daughter who brings tension. The words lingered longer than I expected. No one replied. Dad's voice was the first to cut through. Low, controlled, dangerous. So this was revenge. I met his eyes. Not with fire, not with cruelty, just clarity. No, this was mine. A long silence. I wasn't proud of the moment. I wasn't even angry anymore. I just felt done with asking for space, for recognition, for fairness. "You've always measured love in terms of loyalty," I said, but I learned something different. Love without honesty isn't love. It's control. Adam pushed his chair back but didn't stand. "You ruined Christmas," he muttered. "No," I replied. "You did. When you gambled with what wasn't yours. When you thought no one was watching." Dad still hadn't touched his wine. His hands, always steady, were clasped tightly in his lap. I looked at Mom, who hadn't spoken since the question. "I didn't do this to hurt you," I said quietly, "but I won't apologize for not letting myself be erased." The fireplace crackled behind us as if trying to fill the silence. I folded the legal documents, placed them back in the gold envelope, and slid it toward the center of the table. "No need to pass it around. You'll each be getting a copy in the mail." Then I picked up my napkin, placed it beside my untouched pie, and stood. I didn't slam the chair back. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a speech. I just stood. No one followed me. I walked through the hallway past the photos still lining the walls. My high school graduation photo hung slightly tilted like someone had dusted around it but never bothered to straighten the frame. Adam's portrait, framed in gold, hung just above it, centered, polished, perfect. I made my way into the den. The same plaid armchairs, the same worn rug, the same lamp that always gave off a yellow glow softer than the overhead lights. It was quiet here except for the faint hum of the heat kicking on and the ticking of a wall clock I didn't remember ever stopping. I sat. Not because I needed to rest, but because I needed to think with my body still. There wasn't pride in what I'd done. Not exactly. It hadn't felt triumphant, just necessary. A correction. A line in the sand gently drawn. For most of my life, I'd been asking for a kind of recognition. I couldn't name something between respect and love. I didn't want applause. I didn't want to be Adam. I just wanted to be seen without being compared. And now I'd bought the roof over their heads. I looked around the den. Nothing had changed. The bookshelves still held the same titles: World War II memoirs, business strategy, dusty encyclopedias. A single framed cross-stitch hung on the far wall, Discipline Builds Legacy. Mom stitched it the year Dad made regional partner. She used to say it with a half smile, as if she wasn't sure whether it was wisdom or warning. Outside the window, snow had started falling again, just light flurries like static in the air. The backyard looked untouched, the swing set long gone, the trees older but still standing. I remembered a winter when I was 8. I'd built a snow fort by the oak tree. Adam knocked it over on purpose, though he swore it was an accident. I cried. Dad told me to stop being dramatic. "You'll never get anywhere with that softness," he said. So I started hiding it. All of it. The anger, the sadness, the joy. I learned how to be useful, polite, quiet. I left home with a scholarship and a thank you note, and I never looked back except on holidays and only in my heart. Now here I was, back in this house, owning it technically, but not really part of it. The door creaked open behind me. I didn't turn. Mom's steps were soft, almost tentative. She stood near the doorway, not quite entering. "You shouldn't have done it like that," she said, voice low. I exhaled slowly. "Then, how?" There was a long pause. "I don't know," she whispered, "but it'll destroy him. He made the choice long ago to erase me. I just made sure it was mutual." She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She looked down at her hands, fingers laced so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. I stood and walked past her without touching her, but I paused in the hallway. "There's a key in the guest house," I said, not turning around. "If you ever need space." She didn't answer, but she didn't move either. I stepped outside. The cold hit harder than I expected. Real bracing clean. For the first time in years, I could breathe. Not because I'd won, not because they'd lost, but because the silence finally felt like my own. Back inside, no one spoke. The fire in the dining room had died down to embers. The dishes sat untouched. The wine in Dad's glass had gone warm. A few crumbs dotted the edge of Adam's plate, but even he had stopped eating. Mom stood by the sink, rinsing a spoon that didn't need rinsing. Her motions were slow, repetitive, like she wasn't aware she was doing it. Adam broke the silence first. "She planned this," he muttered. "She prepared," Mom corrected softly. He scoffed and shoved his chair back. We let her sit at our table. Mom turned off the faucet and looked at him. "She is family." Adam's jaw clenched. Not anymore. Dad hadn't moved. He stared at the legal documents Claire had left behind, still resting in the center of the table, folded neatly in that gold foil envelope like a gift no one wanted to open. His hand hovered above it for a moment, then fell back to his lap. "She learned how to do all this," he said slowly, not to anyone in particular. "How to find the property records, trace the loan default, buy us out." There was no bitterness in his voice, just surprise. Maybe shame. She never wanted the money, Mom said, drying her hands. She wanted something else. Dad looked at her. "What?" But Mom didn't answer. Instead, she walked out of the room. Upstairs in the guest bedroom, she found a small box on the nightstand. She hadn't seen Claire carry it in. The wrapping paper was simple brown craft paper tied with red string. A folded note sat on top. "Mom, in case you still keep things. Love, Claire." She opened the box slowly. Inside was the scarf, the one Claire had knitted years ago. Dark blue soft wool with a single row of uneven stitching near the middle Claire's first attempt. It still held the faint scent of lavender. Mom sank onto the edge of the bed, the scarf in her lap, and closed her eyes. Downstairs, Dad remained at the table. He picked up the gold envelope once more. Not to read it again, but to feel the weight of it. For a man who'd measured life in control, in strategy, in certainty, this was foreign ground. He remembered a time when Claire was 10 and she'd written him a letter after a spelling bee. She hadn't won, but she'd thanked him for showing up. He hadn't kept the letter. He barely remembered reading it. Now he wondered what it would have meant to her if he had. In the hallway, a gust of wind rattled the front windows. The house suddenly felt larger, colder, as if it too was realizing something had changed. In the kitchen, Adam pulled out his phone. His banking app took longer than usual to load. He stared at the balances, still enough, but not what it had been. Not stable, not safe. He set the phone down, rubbing his forehead with both hands. No one said it out loud, but the shift had begun. Claire hadn't just brought legal papers, she'd left behind a mirror, and they were finally looking into it. That night, no one spoke much. The plates stayed on the table, the pie hardened at the edges, the guest room door remained closed. But in her absence, Claire had left something they hadn't expected a choice, to hold tighter to silence, or to do something different. The snow had thickened by the time I reached the car. Thick flakes drifted slowly, quietly, like they had no intention of hurrying. I stood for a moment before unlocking the door. My breath made small clouds in the air, each one dissolving faster than the last. For the first time in years, I wasn't leaving out of anger, or rejection, or guilt. I was just leaving. I glanced back at the house windows glowing softly behind frosted glass, the porch light haloed by snow. From a distance, it still looked like a postcard. Warm, intact, untouched, but I knew better. The warmth was just a bulb. The silence inside was heavy now, not peaceful. Still, I didn't hate it. There had been good moments once, childhood summers with lemonade and sprinklers, reading books under the dining room table while Dad took calls in the den, evenings when Mom would hum softly in the kitchen, not realizing anyone could hear. Those things were real too. Pain doesn't erase them. It just sits beside them. I opened the car door and got in the cold seat, reminding me how long I'd been standing. As the engine turned over, the radio came on softly static at first, then a crackling old jazz standard I couldn't name. I let it play. I pulled out slowly, headlights casting long beams through the snow. As I reached the edge of the driveway, I paused. Just a second. Then, I turned onto the road, the tires crunching over packed snow. No one called after me. No one stood at the window, and I didn't expect them to. Back at the small cottage I rented near town, just an hour away, but worlds apart, I slipped off my boots and coat, hanging them neatly by the door. The house smelled like cedar and chamomile tea. My books were still open on the kitchen table, half read. The cat from next door was asleep in the window nook, curled like punctuation at the end of a sentence. I made tea. I didn't need it, but the ritual mattered. A quiet act of reclamation. Boil, steep, pour. At the kitchen counter, I took out the second copy of the deed, the one I hadn't shown anyone. I placed it in the drawer with my passport, lease, and birth certificate. Not to gloat, not to guard. Just to put it where it belonged in my records, not in my heart. I opened the back door for a moment. The yard was blanketed in white, undisturbed. The trees stood dark against the sky. No lights, no noise. It was quiet in the best way. Inside, the kettle clicked off. I poured the tea and brought it to the window seat. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, I was still. Not triumphant. Not broken. Just whole. The house was quiet long after Claire left. No one moved the dishes. The pie remained uneaten. The fire in the dining room had long since gone cold, but no one thought to add more wood. Elaine sat at the edge of the guest bed, still holding the scarf in her lap. The box it came in rested beside her, the brown paper folded neatly, the red string tucked underneath. She hadn't cried, not yet. Her face was still, but her hands kept moving over the scarf, smoothing the soft wool, as if searching for something she couldn't name. Downstairs, Gerald sat alone at the table. He hadn't touched the envelope since Claire left. It sat exactly where she'd placed it, quiet and undeniable. He'd once believed that if you set the rules clearly enough, if you defined the lines and protected the legacy, the rest would fall into place. That belief had guided every decision he'd made, who to trust, what to say, what to withhold. But tonight, the lines had blurred. The legacy, it turned out, had a voice of its own. He looked across the table at the empty seat his daughter had occupied just hours before. She hadn't shouted, she hadn't pleaded, she'd simply handed him the truth and walked away. Upstairs, Elaine opened the drawer in the nightstand. Inside were a few old cards, Mother's Day birthdays, mostly from Adam, mostly store-bought. She added Claire's note to the stack, pressing it flat with her hand before closing the drawer gently. She stood, took the scarf with her, and walked down the hall toward the linen closet. She opened it carefully, quietly, and pulled out a bundle wrapped in tissue paper. The scarf. The blue one. The first one. She held it up, comparing it to the one Claire had just given her. Same yarn, same slightly crooked stitching in the middle. The exact same hands had made both just years apart. She hadn't worn it because she didn't know how to. That winter, Gerald had said it looked too homemade, and Elaine, as always, had listened. Now she folded the new scarf gently and placed it beside the old one, not tucked away this time, but on the top shelf, visible. Downstairs, Adam passed through the hallway and paused by the staircase. He looked toward the den where the light still glowed from a forgotten lamp. The smell of pine had faded, overtaken now by the faint scent of ash and something unspoken. He didn't go in. He only stood there listening to the silence, to the ticking clock, to whatever it was that now filled the space his sister had left behind. It wasn't guilt, not yet, but maybe the beginning of something else. 3 weeks passed. Christmas faded into the gray lull of January. The snowbanks turned to slush. Lights came down. Decorations vanished into attic boxes. Life returned to its usual quiet rhythms. Claire didn't hear from anyone. She hadn't expected to. At school, she resumed grading essays and listening to her students stumble their way through Shakespeare. At home, she baked more than usual. Bread, muffins. Her hands liked the certainty of flour, the quiet of rising dough. Each day ended in a kind of stillness she hadn't known before. Not lonely, just honest. Then, one Thursday afternoon, a plain envelope arrived in her mailbox. No return address, familiar handwriting. She paused before opening it. Inside was a single photograph. No note, no signature. It was an old picture clearly taken on a film camera years ago, faded at the edges, warm in color. Claire was maybe 7, sitting cross-legged in front of the Christmas tree, a paper snowflake in one hand and a crooked smile on her face. The blue scarf was wrapped around her neck. Not the one she had just given. The first one, the one she had made with help from her second-grade teacher. Uneven, earnest. In the background of the photo, Elaine stood behind her, one hand gently resting on Claire's shoulder, the other mid-motion as if adjusting an ornament. Claire stared at it for a long time. The image wasn't perfectly composed. It wasn't meant to be saved, but someone had kept it. And now someone had sent it. She turned the photo over. In her mother's handwriting, careful, slanted, unmistakable, were 5 words I should have tried harder. Nothing more. Claire ran her thumb over the words. She felt no rush of forgiveness, no flood of tears, just a quiet warmth that moved through her like steam rising from a mug on a winter morning. She didn't know where her mother had found the photo. Maybe it had always been there. Maybe, like the scarf, it had waited quietly on a shelf until someone was ready to look again. She placed the photo in a frame. Simple wood, no embellishment. She set it on the windowsill above the kitchen sink beside the basil plant that never seemed to grow straight. It didn't change everything, but it changed something. Spring came slowly. The snow melted in patches, revealing brown grass and brittle leaves beneath. The trees hesitated before budding. The sun stretched longer in the evenings, but the wind still carried the memory of winter. Claire didn't mark the change with anything dramatic. No celebration, no announcement. Just smaller signs. The windows opened a little wider each day, the tea swapped for coffee again, the scarf folded and placed in the drawer. She kept the photo on the windowsill. Each morning she glanced at it as she rinsed her cup or watered the basil, which despite its stubborn tilt had started to grow straighter. She hadn't written back to her mother. She wasn't sure if she needed to. Some things once named don't need to be repeated. At school, the students were rehearsing Our Town. Claire stayed late, helping them with lines, adjusting the stage lights, reminding them to project. The play, with all its ordinary beauty and quiet grief, felt strangely right. One afternoon after rehearsal, Claire walked home instead of driving. The sun was just low enough to stretch her shadow across the sidewalk. She passed the bookstore still with its creaky sign and crooked hours. Past the cafe with the chipped mugs and the best peach muffins in town. Past the bench at the park where she'd once sat and cried without knowing why. Everything was still there, and she was still here. Different, maybe, but not broken. She paused at the florist on Main Street. A small display caught her eye: hyacinths, pale purple, barely open. Her mother used to grow them in front of the porch, coaxing them from the cold earth each March, like it was a kind of miracle. Claire bought one. She didn't plan to. She just did. Back home, she placed it on the kitchen table. No vase, just the small pot, a little lopsided, full of soft green hope. That night, she wrote a single sentence in her journal, a habit she'd picked up over the winter. Some things bloom even after the frost. She didn't mean forgiveness. Not exactly. More like space. The kind that opens when you stop trying to make others understand and instead just begin to understand yourself. In the quiet of her small house, Claire sat by the window and watched the sky go dark. No noise, no voices, no weight pressing against her chest, just stillness and peace.